What's going on, everybody? I hope you're well. Today we're making an interpretation of the Gokstad pouch, which is a Viking age pouch design. You can, as always, find the pattern and artwork for any of my projects on my Patreon, website, or Etsy shop, so check that out, and let's get started. This video is brought to you by LONSDALE Leather. Make sure you check them out in the description down below for all sorts of supplies, tools, and of course, leather. Now, I did mention off the top that you can pick up this pattern as well as many more on my website, Etsy shop, or Patreon. Just a heads up that I've released 3 patterns this month on Patreon, so that's your best bet if you want to get a hold of a bunch of patterns. But if you want to just pick up this pattern off my website or Etsy shop, you can head on over there, link in the description down below, or as I said earlier, I'll put a link up here again for you guys. There's a couple of ways to do all these stitching holes on this pouch, and one is to lay the paper down on your project and punch straight through the paper for the holes. And I thought this was the best way, but after playing around with my stitching punch, I prefer just to do it without it. Just use your eyeballs and it should line up fine. I'm going to show you 2 examples of that going on here. So one side of the main body of the pouch I did by punching right through the paper, and the other side I did by just eyeballing it. When I prototyped this pouch, I did the fabric part in linen. This is a turquoise wool, and it turned out really nice, so I recommend picking up something just a tiny bit heavier. So as we saw earlier, this leather is about a 11-12 ounce. You want it to be heavier, you want it to have some structure, so when your bag opens and closes, or your pouch opens and closes, it doesn't lose all of its structure. Now, you could glue together a couple of pieces of leather to get it to this thickness, or if you have some heavier leather, obviously just use that. After all these years, I finally picked up some professional edge bevelers from LONSDALE Leather. They've got this nice subtle curve to them. They're super sharp. I'm really digging them so far. I think I'll do a little review video shortly. After we've got all this beveling done, we're just going to punch some holes. I've got a certain hole size set on here, mainly because of the leather lace I used. You could stitch this together with waxed thread, you could do all sorts of things, so don't consider these holes set in stone by any means. Use your best judgment based on what you have on hand to put it together. I used some deer for this part of the pouch. It can be a little difficult to cut, so just take your time and be patient with it. It's difficult to cut because it's got a little bit of stretch to it, so you kind of got to pull it in the right spot and make sure everything moves correctly as you're cutting it. There's certainly other options you could use, but I really like the feel of this leather, so I've used it in a few projects lately. Here's a little trick. You just pull away the excess as you cut it off, and it helps you get a nice straight, even cut. This happens because it stops the leather from bunching up under the pull of your knife. I've got to admit the curved parts of these lines were a bit of a pain, but I managed to get through them fine without screwing anything up. Pretty sure you don't need to see me cut out a whole nother one of these, so let's just move along. Now we're going to just use some fabric tape to fold the edge, so we've got a nice even edge that doesn't fray when we stitch it down. I don't use Super 77 very often, but this is a great time to use it. The wool takes really well with the back of the leather and will help you stick your piece on. Well, it won't help you, it'll do all the sticking. And then it'll enable you to punch your holes nicely and stitch it together. Start from your nice folded edge and roll the piece out. Give it a little tap. And now we're all set to punch a bunch of holes in it. My original thought was that you could either punch your holes through the paper, or mark your holes through the paper, or just use them as a general guideline. And I did 2 versions on this video for you guys just to see how it ended up and what I liked more. And I actually liked just eyeballing it more. Now, the first way is to punch it through the paper. So this is that right now. I wanted to use these new punches I got from LONSDALE Leather. They're really cool, a little expensive, but you know, I'm upgrading all my stuff. But I only was able to get a 1 or a 4. So I got the 1 and the 4. So it's a little tedious, as you can see. but I got it done. After all your holes are punched, we're going to stitch the top edge and then stitch all the interior bits. You may think that this is going to take forever. It does take a little while, but it definitely wasn't forever. It went along pretty quick, especially with my stitching pony is really handy. I also wasn't saddle stitching for the most part here. I was just running stitch. Did a little bit of kind of saddle stitching there, I guess. I like just looping my threads through. I do a little back stitch and then loop them through to close them. Sometimes I knot them, but I generally avoid knotting them just because it never really works unless it's waxed thread, and this wasn't waxed thread. So here I am just eyeballing it, which enabled me to use my 4-hole punch on everything. I didn't have to worry about the spacing. And then around the corners I used my 1. Would have been nice to have a 2, and it worked out just fine. In fact, just eyeballing it and having slightly tighter stitches, I thought looked way better. Like the one on the left is the one where I just eyeballed it. I like the tighter stitches myself, so when you're going around the edge of your pouch, count how many times you're using that hole punch. So I counted 30. That means on the other side, I should have 30 as well. That's to make sure you have everything line up when you start stitching it. You could stack them on top of each other, but with the wool, 2 pieces of wool and 2 pieces of leather, it could get a little finicky and you may miss your punches. So I just did each one separately. And then you invert them, stitch them all together inside out, and then turn them inside out again. Now you've got the body of your pouch. It's looking pretty good. This is a super easy pattern. I'm pretty happy with it. It comes together rather quickly and it looks really cool. Now, I haven't really seen many with leather carving on them, but I decided to do some carving. This will be in the pattern when you purchase it, but it's really simple. I don't know what I was doing here with my tracing film, why I have some weird straight edge off the side of the film. That doesn't make any sense. I fix it with a ruler, but I don't know. I hadn't been drinking. Now we're just making some simple cuts. I'm not going to bevel any of this. I'm not even going to antique this, honestly, because I wanted to try something a little different with some color this time, because all my stuff, well, not all my stuff, but a lot of my stuff is brown and brown and brown. So I really like the nice blue I got with the wool. So I decided to do this brown and then paint all of that carving with kind of like a blue and a turquoisey kind of color. But first we're burnishing up all the edges. I'm just going to use some tokonole and a dauber. This stuff is still a little messy to me. I really like beeswax. It's nice and simple. Rub it on, burnish it, done. But this gives a much better edge, but it is a little messy. I gotta figure something out. I won't bore you guys too much with my elite painting skills. Needless to say, I'm using some Angelus paint. I'm painting it on the project. Dipping it in the paint again. Putting more paint on the project. Rinse and repeat until you have a lovely blue all over everything. I use neutral Resolene a lot. I really like it. I usually spray it on, but for the sake of this video, I decided to put it on with the dauber. Get some water on the dauber, squeeze out most of the water, put your Resolene on, wipe away any excess, and then let it dry. I'm doing the back as well. It'll help the piece darken up a little bit and protect it. Now I'm using some Kodiak lace to lace it together. I've knotted it and left it long because I want to split the lace and add some beads. Now all I have to do is lace it together. You can stitch it here, you can use a whole bunch of different lace, whatever strikes your fancy. But I like the Kodiak lace. I'm pretty excited to see what variations people come up with on this pouch. So make sure you send me pictures of your completed work so I can throw it up on my social media platforms. I just trim these to the length I want, and then I split these into 2, which is a little finicky because the lace is so thin. But I made it work, and I had all these cool beads lying around. The final part of this project is to add your shoulder strap or belt strapping. It can be long, short, whatever you need it to do, but remember that it goes through both those upper leather pieces, and it's able to close your pouch with just the weight of the pouch. So if you got something in it, it'll just close when you hang it from your shoulder. Well, there you go, the Gokstad pouch. I'm calling this version 1 because there are a couple of ways that it has been interpreted, I think. If you liked the video and you got something out of it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for future videos, hit the notification button so you don't miss any of my content, and until next time, keep on being creative in whatever it is you do.